Investigators now say the suspect in the deadly attack in New Orleans acted alone, and Mike Johnson is trying to secure the votes needed to remain House Speaker as a new Congress convenes. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. The FBI now says the man who rammed his truck into a crowd of New Year's revelers in New Orleans acted alone. Officials say he had pledged his allegiance to ISIS. The driver was killed in a shootout with police. 14 people were killed in the attack and dozens of others were hurt. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports New Orleans remains under heightened security.
The site of the attack, Bourbon Street, is back open with new barricades and a heavy police presence in the French Quarter, including the Louisiana National Guard. Praline vendor Kinsey Falk, pushing his cart along Canal Street, says he's just trying to keep going despite the tragedy.
Everybody's up in arms and on their toes and trying to figure out what's next.
The FBI is calling the mass murder in New Orleans an act of terrorism and a premeditated and evil act. Debbie Elliott, NPR News, New Orleans.
The new Congress convenes later today. The first task of the House of Representatives is to vote for a speaker. Current Speaker Mike Johnson is running for the job again, and he has President-elect Trump's endorsement. The GOP's majority in the House is so slim that Johnson needs almost every Republican lawmaker's support to win. But he's already lost at least one GOP vote. If he loses any more, he'll lose the speakership. Johnson says Republicans need to stick together.
We need to stay unified so we can save the country, and I think that's an important message.
2 years ago, it took 14 days and 15 rounds of voting before Republican Kevin McCarthy won the speakership, and the Republicans ended up booting him out of the job in less than a year. Today's vote is important. The House cannot take up any other business until a speaker is chosen. If there's no speaker selected by next Monday, the House could not certify the results of the 2024 presidential election that day, as required by the Constitution. This incoming Congress will have fewer Christian representatives than in the past, but as NPR's Jason DeRose reports, they still make up an overwhelming majority of both the House and the Senate.
Christians comprise about 87% of this Congress, a higher portion than the U.S. population. Pew Research says about 62% of Americans overall identify as Christian. Members of Congress are far more likely than the population in general to identify as religious. Nearly 3 in 10 Americans say they're either atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, while less than 1% of the House and Senate identify that way. Other data points, Jews will make up 6% of Congress, while being only about 2% of the U.S. population. Muslims and Hindus, meanwhile, will each account for less than 1% of the incoming Congress. Jason DeRose, NPR News.
Residents of Syria's Golan Heights say Israeli troops are raiding their homes and villages. They say they're worried this is the start of a land grab. Israel says it's trying to protect its security. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi visited the region.
Israel says its move into the buffer zone that's monitored by the United Nations is aimed at keeping their borders secure. The military operation started just hours after the overthrow of the Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad by the rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS. Mohammed Farouk lives about 300 yards from an Israeli checkpoint in the El Ba'th village. He says Israeli tanks roll into his village regularly. Farouk said his small daughter now wakes up at night shouting, a tank, out of fear. He says Syrians are worried there will be more annexation and more Israeli settlements in the area. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, in the Golan Heights.
Alcohol use is a leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S., according to a new advisory from the Surgeon General. NPR's Allison Aubrey tells us 72% of U.S. adults report consuming one or more drinks per week.
Alcohol use contributes to about 100,000 cancer cases per year and about 20,000 cancer deaths. The Surgeon General's report finds many people are not aware of the direct links between alcohol and cancer risk, though there's now evidence demonstrating a causal relationship for at least 7 types of cancer, including breast cancer in women, as well as colorectal, esophagus, liver, mouth, and throat cancers. The more people drink, the higher the risk, though the risk of breast cancer may start to increase with 1 or fewer drinks per day. Current guidelines recommend no more than 1 drink a day for women, 2 for men. Allison Aubrey, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR.